Welcome to the Work Awesome podcast. This is episode 20, the last episode in our first season of the podcast. Yay. Today I have Sarah and Megan with me to wrap up the season. They are obviously familiar faces, being at least one of them being on every podcast episode this season because they are the recruiters at Avian, and this is our recruiting podcast. Today we are doing resume reviews, and like I said to Sarah and Megan before, I really want to say live resume reviews, but we aren't doing this live. Maybe in the future, if this episode does really well, maybe we'll do live resume reviews in the future, and people can send us their resumes so that you guys can give some advice on resume writing live to an audience. That's an idea for the future, though, so let's just focus on today. Today we have just example resumes to go over, some that Sarah put together based off of probably some things that she's seen in the past, and then also some that I found online. I also have my resume that I'm going to let them tear apart and give me some advice on. So let's just dive into it. Well, I guess first, let me remind everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe so you're notified of new episodes when they go live. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or any other audio platform, again, follow so that you know when notifications go live. I have a really weird camera angle this week. It'll be better on the next episodes, but for this week, I'm going to be looking up at the camera, so that's just weird to me. All right. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to share my screen.
Share resumes.
Yes.
Okay.
I will say another disclaimer. This might be a good episode to watch on YouTube instead of listening to through an audio platform because we are going to be doing a lot of screen sharing and it might just have a better experience that way. I'm also going to turn off the names so those aren't very distracting. All right. So the first one we have here is for Marsha Jones.
Yeah. And of course, Ian, I did exactly what you mentioned in the introduction. I took a couple of the things that I see that I think people could improve about or improve on and put them into a resume, a very simple resume format, just so that we would have kind of something to look at and discuss. So none of this information on this resume is actually real. So the first thing.
I just want to say that's true for all these resumes. None of the information is real, except for mine. No. My information is real. I didn't think about this, but please don't call me because my phone number is on here. But it's okay. Maybe I'll just have to change my phone number after this. Go ahead. So let's jump into this. I do want to also just quickly do an overview of this specific resume. It looks like at the top we have the person's name. We have a short kind of introduction, experience, education, skills, activities. So it looks like there's like the basic information here. Go ahead, Sarah or Megan, talk about what you would change and what sticks out to you on this.
Okay. So the first thing I would like to point out is that when Megan and I are talking about the way we're looking at resumes, we work for a government contractor. So most of the work that we do supports that government contractor, and we have specific requirements that we're looking for. So really what's super important is to make sure that if you are qualified for the position, that your resume is tailored to make sure that all of your qualifications that are necessary for that position are included in the resume. Because as much as Megan and I would love to know all of our candidates, we don't know everything about you. We only have what we see in this resume. So providing as much information as you can that speaks to your qualifications for the position is really important. One of the big things, and you'd be shocked to hear this, Ian, but sometimes we will see a resume and we don't know how to contact the person because their contact information is not up to date. So that means we could have this great candidate and we have no way to reach you. So make sure that the phone number and the email are up to date. Your mailing address in the resume is not as important information. That becomes more important if we're extending an offer letter. But really make sure that contact information is up to date, and make sure that there is a way for people to leave a voicemail. Now I know, it can be difficult to keep that voicemail empty. I know I struggle with it if I have a lot of meetings during the day. But make sure you're checking your email, including spam, if you're looking for a job, or your junk mail, because sometimes that it can go to there. And make sure that you're checking your messages. The other thing is the summary. So it's really nice. I think Meghan would agree with me. It's really nice if we get a snapshot of what your kind of what your core qualifications are. That's great. We really appreciate that. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts about that, Meghan, but I really like it, especially if someone says, 15 years of acquisition support services,
right?
Then I know right there that they are qualified. I mean, I'm still going to look at the rest of the resume, but I know that they at least meet that years of experience. What are your thoughts on that, Meghan?
So Meghan, before you go, the summary, you're talking about this top piece right here. Is that okay? Just to clarify.
So for me personally, I agree with that. So this is the way that I always tell people when I'm looking at resumes, or when I help people with resumes, is you obviously want to put your experience and everything in there and tell us what you can do and what you did at each job. But to me, the summary is your first point to be able to capture where we're at. That's the first thing that we see when we open your page. That's the first thing that's going to basically wrap up your entire resume. So we're going to be able to go through and see all the things that you did. But like Sarah mentioned, putting it at the very top where you're saying, here's what experience I have, here's as many years as I have, or especially in our world, when somebody says active secret clearance, or when they even say their start date, or things like that, and they put it inside of their summary, it's the very first point for us to be able to kind of see what we're going to look over for the rest of the interview. And I know with especially the managers that I work with here, and I will say it's pretty new here, because at my last company, they really didn't care too much about the summary. I think it was something they kind of skipped over. Here, a lot of the managers, if that summary is not good, it really looks like you also didn't take the time to kind of reiterate yourself and talk about yourself. So it can be kind of one of those things where it's they're not getting the full understanding of who you are in that first summary. So a lot of people do take that time to just really dive into that. So I would use that. Obviously, you don't need to repeat, and I think I've said this in past podcast episodes, but don't repeat everything that's going to be on your resume, every single job description. But as Sarah mentioned, making sure that it's tailored to that job and fit it to the job, as long as you're not lying, obviously, and you're qualified. Make sure that you're saying, hey, if this job's requiring 10 years of experience, you tell us how many you have and put it in the summary.
Yeah. So some of the other things I think are important too is when you're applying for a job, this person is saying that they are applying for a senior pilot position. If you look at their experience, they really might not have enough experience for that. So you have to really, keep in mind that in order for you to be called for the position, you really need to meet the requirements of the position. One of the other things that I'd like to note is that if in that summary, so you can see in this sample resume, the person mentions that they are looking for a position with a specific company. If you're going to do that, and that's totally fine. If you want to, for Avian, if you want to say I'm looking for a project analyst position with Avian, that's great. But just make sure that if you're applying for Avian, it doesn't say I'm looking for a position with Aviation RS. So I've seen that as well. Because then to me, I'm like, well, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they meant to apply to a different company and it just came through our site. They thought they were applying somewhere else.
Yeah.
So just another thing. Oh, so go ahead, Sarah.
No, it's fine. But attention to detail is very important as well. I mean, this is the first presentation of yourself that we're seeing.
Yeah. And I would just say under experience too, obviously more than just 3 bullet points, putting down, breaking it out without being too much. We don't really need a 5-page resume either. But again, that goes back to, I think what a lot of people never learned was that as long as you're being truthful, you can pull up the job description of what you're applying for. And if you did those things that's in that job description, put it in your bullets, because it's exactly to what we need. So I remember when I was looking for this job, I pulled it up and I was like, okay, I did this and I did a version of this. So I put it in there. And if I didn't do it, I obviously didn't lie about it, but making sure that you're speaking specifically to the job, that you have more than just one or two bullet points. And then the other one that would be kind of surprising, but people just tend to kind of skip over, is the time that they were at the company. So it doesn't need to be an exact day, for example, but I definitely think like the month and the year that you were there, because that helps us determine if you have the years of experience we need as well. And I've seen that missing on a lot of resumes, surprisingly. So making sure that that's in there just helps us a lot too.
Yeah, that's really good. And if you're using, well, I can address this later, but especially if you're using a job board, make sure that that you have an end date to when you were working, so that it's not confusing as to where people are and for how long.
Right.
And then if you also notice that this person says that they manage, in this position, they manage a team of 20 pilots. If you're applying for a position that requires management experience, then make sure that management experience is included in the bullet, because your job title might not necessarily indicate that. So make sure that kind of pertinent information is included in that.
Yeah. So just to break down this specific resume a little bit more, it sounds like at the top here, you'd probably want to add like your email address. I don't know if I can do that. I don't think I can do that. You probably want to add your email address, so your contact information is right up here. Mailing address, I would say probably could go like at the bottom, maybe as a footer or something.
It doesn't even have to be in there at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Another
doesn't
one that I
have to be in
would
there.
suggest versus even the mailing address though would that I've seen a lot more people doing is your LinkedIn profile, because
Yes.
they reach out to you that way.
Yep.
And that's been super helpful with recruiting. So if you have one, I would suggest that too.
And I also, talking about LinkedIn, I would suggest you can change the URL of your LinkedIn profile to the default. Just basically adds in a bunch of random numbers and letters, and then maybe part of your name. You can actually go into LinkedIn, and if you do a quick Google search on how to customize your LinkedIn URL, it'll come up. You can go in and set it to linkedin.com/ I think it's in / whatever you want afterwards. So like mine is Ian Wolbert, because it's easy to type on anywhere online on a resume. It's easy for people to navigate to.
Yeah. The other thing I'd like to mention though is if you are including your LinkedIn, then make sure that your LinkedIn is up to date and
matches your resume.
Yeah, and employer ready.
Yeah.
Or recruiter ready. You want it's another way you're presenting yourself. So put your best foot forward.
Yeah. So the summary here probably needs to go into a little bit more detail, I would assume.
Yeah.
One sentence isn't enough.
I mean, Megan and I appreciate any information that's provided to us. And part of that too is when we are, and making sure obviously that it's demonstratable through that we can go through the resume and go, oh yeah, that's totally true. But when we're presenting these candidates to the hiring managers, we're also really, we're kind of a cheerleader for you. So we are saying, this person has 25 years of acquisition experience. And if it's laid out in that, and they're really looking for a career growth opportunity, if it's laid out in that summary, that makes our job a lot easier. And then we kind of understand what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of taken the place of cover letters in our world.
That's what I was going to say. Is I remember you mentioning this in previous podcasts where some people prefer just the summary rather than the cover letter, because it really does cover the same information.
Yeah.
It's less to read. It's all in one document. It makes it really easy. But
and it's really just it's almost like what did they used to say? You're like 1 minute or 3 minute elevator speech.
Kind of like your elevator speech. Yeah.
But it's kind of like that.
Isn't true for everybody. So
No.
I say there's probably still value in sending a cover letter, but make sure that your summary is kind of matches, I guess would be my advice.
And if the application asks for a cover letter, always make sure you have one.
Yeah.
So ours does not ask for one. So that's kind of a clear indication that you probably don't need one.
Right.
Okay. So if you want to go back down to the education part, Ian.
Sure. Well, I want to talk about the experience really fast. I assume you need more experience than just the past month that you've worked. So
thank you so much for that. Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to bring that up further down in the resume, but yes. So I think Meghan mentioned a little bit ago, I know a lot of people are very concerned with how long their resume is, and you definitely don't want, you don't need to submit a novel. But if it's going to take, you could say, well, this person maybe was looking to have a nice format and keep it under to a page.
Right.
But if that's not demonstrating that you're qualified for the position, then that's not going to necessarily be a good decision. So you can see that if you look, you can see that this person decided to put their years of graduation or their years when they were applying for or going to school.
Right.
So now you can see that there's a pretty good gap. I don't think that you need to put necessarily your year of high school diploma or whatever. I don't think that needs to be in there. Personally.
To me, I always assume that if you list your college degree, then the recruiter probably assumes you went to high school and graduated high school.
Yeah, but if you haven't gone to college and the position requires it, then it's not a bad idea to have that in there.
Absolutely.
But if you notice this pretend individual, started their degree right out of high school, and it's 2021 now. Mm-hmm. So I would say that probably this information is really not a good idea to put on there, because to me, it's actually hurting the situation.
Could speak to it just being outdated, and this goes to the other situation too, because I think we get into this a lot, where they may have graduated, they just never updated their thing. So
yes, absolutely.
I will reach out and be like, hey, this looks a little weird. Like, have you graduated?
Right.
Obviously not like that, but I think that just speaks to that, to just remember that paying attention to detail and making sure you're updating things is really important.
Right.
And then just to go back to experience really quick, and I'll stop with this resume, but for experience, yes, you want to have more than 1 month. But one thing that I also suggest is putting in everything that is relevant, even if it doesn't speak exactly to that job. So for example, like on my personal resume, I was a store manager at Wawa like years and years ago when I first started working. But then I went into like the jewelry world, and I was only part-time and then seasonal, and then I became a manager there. And then I went to recruiting. So when I applied for this job, I still kept Wawa on there because I was still a manager. So I think it spoke to a lot, even though it was, the very beginning of my career. I think that it still showed a lot of who I am as a person and what I do and where I've been. And I say that in the sense of like accounting, for example. I've run into a lot of times here where somebody may be applying for like a senior level accounting position, so they don't include that time that they were working a register 20 years ago, but that extra 20 years ago could be what qualifies you for technically using that position as accounting. So I think it's really important, like even if it seems like a smaller job, like when you first started, if it's in the same field of what you're applying for, I would definitely make sure that's included, because it could count towards those years of experience. Especially in our world, a lot of our contracts require over 10 to 20 years of experience doing something if you don't have a degree, or, different years if you do. So sometimes just putting even 20 years ago, to me, if you have that much experience, is really important, because we've been able to kind of finagle people into a position for working the register at a gas station years ago. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think it's important.
So one of the other parts of the education, unless you're really close to graduation, I would be very careful about including that. Not to mention the fact that make sure that if you're putting a bachelor's of science from the Community College of Southern California, make sure that
it's true.
Community College of Southern California actually offers a BS.
Right.
And it might, but just make sure that that's actually a legitimate degree. You're not, that is something that can be obtained from that institution.
Now, I do have a question about education.
Sure.
And it's just a myth that I've heard before. A lot of people get confused about like bachelor's of arts and bachelor's of science. I went to a liberal arts school, so
Sure.
I think everything except for the nursing program and like the computer science program was a bachelor of arts. It doesn't matter if it was another science program or if it was anything science related. You still got a BA rather than a BS. Does that make a difference to you guys? Or
sure,
no?
It can. It depends on the position. If we require a technical degree, I mean, some positions will actually spell out a BS, but most of our jobs are BS or BA.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
What about that skills section? So, do you?
So-
I guess
Sorry.
my question is how much is too much, and is it kind of? I guess
This is another area where I would say, really speak to the position description.
Yeah.
So for example, and if you look in here, this person under skills, they put military experience, but where is that anywhere in their resume?
Right.
You know what I mean? So make sure that military experience, I've seen many candidates, and it's surprising to me because it's such a great service to our country that you would want to leave that off. But I've seen many times where people have left their military service off of their resume, even if it was 30 years ago, still put that on there. And I can't imagine that there aren't some skills that you would have had access to or that you would have participated in that wouldn't have some relevancy to the position. So make sure that's on there. And then, like I said, I think really the skills should be very consistent with what the job description is looking for, as long as it's truthful, of course.
I think that person's skills here looks really good, though. That's pretty much exactly kind of what I think that's the best thing about this resume, not to be mean, but I think that's
well, I and I was trying to put things that were not good. So,
well, I think that it speaks well to, okay, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I have my top secret clearance. Like, I do think that that's something to definitely include. So as Sarah said, just making sure that it speaks to that job description again. I would also, like, if there's any softwares or anything like that the job description reads that it needs, put those softwares in there. If you have any certifications using those softwares, or like I mentioned before, if you have SHRM notifications through HR, anything like that, that is probably a good place to put that. It just speaks more to the relevance of the position. And then that activity section, to me, just jump ahead. I think that's completely unnecessary. When I've helped with a resume before, I'm like, we're going to delete this. We're taking this out here.
Yep. Why would you waste your space? Why would you not include your military experience, but include the activity?
So I read this, and my first thought is that it might belong up with the summary.
That's what I was going to say. To me, they could have really taken that sentence and put it in the summary in this case. But I've also seen a lot of times where people like to do the activities as like volunteer services and stuff that they've done in the community. And that's amazing. I'm not trying to belittle what you've done.
Yeah.
But unless the relevance is there, it's really unnecessary. But that sentence particularly could have been amazing at the very first sentence of the summary.
Yeah. So I guess to tie it back to maybe a job that Avian has, if we're hiring like an instructor, because we do have instructors that work for us, and an activity that they list might be like teaching summer camp in doing X, because that relates to them instructing something. Is that something you
I think that would be a good example of where it could be relevant.
Or would that just belong in the experience section?
Sure.
I mean,
either way, I think.
Okay.
I think in that, I think that, it could go in the experience section. I just think activities is completely unnecessary. I just would not put that. But what you just said, Ian, could be a really good point, that maybe if they've been doing that for 7 years and they've been teaching here for 5 and they've been doing this for 3, summarize it all up to say these are the years of experience I have, and then put that in the summary part.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next one that we have here. Another one that Sarah sent over. This one is titled Job Board Application.
Yeah. So basically we don't really have to go over this too much.
Okay.
What I really wanted, and I think Meghan and I see this way too often, is when people, I don't know that people realize what it looks like when they apply through a job board. And I think we've addressed this before, but I still see them come through. So this is legitimately the format of some of the job boards when you click apply. Mm-hmm. This has none of the information that Meghan and I would need to go over a position. So if you go down, I mean, there's like nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing, very little value there.
Right.
And so I really think if you're just sending out resumes to send out resumes, then I guess that's a choice you could make. But if you're sending out resumes because you want a position, go to the website of the company, or make sure that you have a formatted resume on your job board, and click apply through the job portal for that company, and make sure that your resume looks really good.
Is there this shouldn't matter. Is there a major job board that might be better than another, like Glassdoor, Indeed, Monster? Do you guys prefer one over the other?
I think there's value from those job boards, but I think that you need to take the time to build your profile on those job boards if you're going to decide to use those to apply through or have your resume on them. I think if you're just kind of haphazardly adding some information to your profile and not other information, then it's not going to necessarily present you as the candidate that you want to be presented as.
Right.
I would say the other thing just to be mindful of is even sites like Indeed, which is great. Unfortunately, and it's not just our software, but even softwares I've used at other positions, sometimes when resumes come into our applicant tracking system, they do just get jumbled up because of the way it came in. Mm-hmm. So I personally, like if I find a job, when I was looking on Indeed, I found the job and I would go over to the actual website and just apply on the website. And then another thing you could do too is I know I've seen, especially here, plenty of people who find out who the recruiter is and send them the resume straight to them if they have a problem finding it on the website. Not saying to do that every time, but I know people who do that because unfortunately sometimes they do come in like this, even from Indeed. Not this bad, but they do come in kind of jumbled.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually a good point too, Megan. If you're having trouble applying to a position somewhere, like that it's just not going through well or whatever, reach out to the company because, or if you don't have the bandwidth, to make the whole process work or whatever, make sure you reach out so that you, ask if there's a place where you can send it or if there's an alternative link that can be used or something like that. Because we definitely companies don't want to miss out on good candidates.
Right. All right. So the next one I have is my resume. And
Yay.
So
Megan, I'm going to let you start with that. I'm scared to touch it.
I'm scared. So this is relatively updated, I believe. And the reason
it doesn't have your correct title right now, though.
It doesn't. But the reason that it's relatively updated is because our company actually asks us to keep our resumes updated just in case when we're bidding on new work and new contracts. Sometimes the work that I do or the work that somebody else in the company does can fit for that contract, and they always want to have the ability to put a person forward. So go ahead, tear it apart, please.
So sorry I'm looking this way, but my screen this way was way too small. So I'm looking over here. So this is honestly just a preference thing. I don't think it's anything like significantly wrong with your resume. I just personally prefer to see resumes this way. It's easier as a recruiter to me to see like where your job description is and then have the dates and time immediately next to or after that where it's bolded and you can kind of see just quicker what that looks like in the years of experience. Another thing, I haven't updated my resume for AVN yet, so I don't know what this looks like. I'm not trying to I feel like I'm breaking down the company's rules right now on the podcast, but another thing that I have found unnecessary, I guess, in every position except for the one that you're probably currently in is speaking to the address of the location. I don't necessarily think you need to put where it was. Maybe the most relevant one, just because to show that you're in state if you're applying, but I think that could also go in your summary section. So I don't know that it needs to be right there, but that's just, again, personal preference. Right. That's all I can see right now. So everything else looks pretty good.
I'm going to edit it in live.
Yay.
So, all right, so we can get rid of these.
What do you think, Sarah? Do you think that's necessary?
Yeah, I think the only concern that I would have is if there's a company that's of a similar name. So if you needed to do a reference check.
Right. And I guess like you're saying, if the recruiter really wants to know about the company that you work for, they'll put in the time to put it in
Figure it out.
Google and figure out where it's actually at.
Well, and we should be reaching out to you before we'd
Yeah.
be doing any reference
Yeah.
checks anyway.
So this is the second half of it. This, I believe, was tailored to, let me read it. Yeah, I think this was tailored to some of the work I did when I was working on contract for the government.
Yeah.
Even
So
I
I think
for qualification, like, that's what with the first resume I think you would be better is this example where it's like, here's the core things that I do for this job, and to be able to apply for another position that does something similar. Like you mentioned, some of the softwares that you use that you've been using or have experience with and things like that. So I think that that's good.
Yeah, and the other good thing is that you, as Meghan mentioned before, when she was talking about her personal experience with, keeping the position on that maybe wasn't 100% relevant, but had some relevancy, you use that as additional experience.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to build each of those positions out to show all the bullets of work, but you have it included. So it would count for, potential qualification and experience.
And I think my thought process with this was that these last two additional experience ones were internships I had during college. So
Right.
I kind of felt like they deserve to be on here because, like you mentioned earlier, that wasn't when we were recording, but earlier we did mention that college was not that far away from me. So keeping these on here was important because I wanted to show that I still had those years of experience, and there wasn't much of a gap between those times. And then these were really like the jobs that I had outside of college up here.
Yep.
And I do want to just speak to that though, because I think another thing that people I think is commonly misconception is that we can't count internships, and it's not that we can on every single position, but there have been some jobs where they will count an internship as experience. So if you have,
especially if it's full
I would put
time.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've been thinking about is that when this is definitely not the resume I used to apply to Avian with originally, but when I did originally apply, the hiring manager, let me grab the correct keyword so make this a little bit easier for myself. The hiring manager asked that I did this, where I would add up the amount of time. So basically, what is that, like 3-4 months? And then I would put that here so that it was easier to understand how much total experience I had.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys recommend, or
Honestly, I think in that case, you personally, to me, could have just taken out the dates altogether and just said, here's the months of experience that I've had. Just because, well, maybe, if you want to show
I would like the dates still.
Yeah, if you wanted to show how long ago it was. But
the dates are valuable because it shows that you have
when it
continuous.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other part that's important there with that additional experience is that we can tell it was concurrent with college.
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't think, oh, he's job hopping.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because people do need to be a little bit aware of the fact that Meghan and I, as much as we love recruiting, we don't like to re-recruit for positions over and over and over again. So our goal is to put someone in a position who's going to be really happy in that position for a good amount of time and do great work. So it's kind of a win-win. Yeah.
We talk about this internally a lot because it affects us, but it is expensive to hire somebody and to honor them. And when you have those people that do the job hopping, we've had people that have literally worked a week for us and unfortunately found a new position after that first week. It hurts because it hits us financially as well as emotionally, obviously, because we think that
we get attached.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just part of our culture, not to be attached, but to include everybody as a family right through the door. All right, so let's not dwell on my resume too much longer. Move to these final few. So these are from a website called Resume Genius right here. I think that these are actually really good, and I'll get your guys' opinion on them in just a minute. But I do want to say if you are stuck and need to redo your resume, Resume Genius seems to have a really great list of different resumes for different positions. So definitely recommend jumping on there to at least get some ideas and at least a starting point.
Yep.
So
this resume looks very easy to look at. It's got the information that we need to reach out to the candidate. It's got the summary. You can see that I wouldn't need to go through and count up how many years of experience. Right. It's got their latest degree, so I know that they've gone on to get their master's. It's got the skills really identified there. So if I'm looking for something specifically when I'm doing a search in our system, their name is going to come up if I'm looking for any of those things. They've got bullets. They've got kind of the key things that they've supported on each position, but not an overabundant amount of things. It looks really good. Yeah.
I definitely think this one's laid out nicely from a graphics perspective because, I'm a creative person and love graphics. I think it looks super nice, super easy to read.
Yeah. Can you go back down to the very bottom?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other things that's really great is that they both spelled out and put the acronym for their certification. Mm-hmm. So that if Megan and I are looking for someone with that certification, either way we look, it's going to come up.
Yep.
Which is great. And we do that in our system and on job boards. We're doing keyword searches as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge one that I was going to say, Sarah. Thank you. Just when we do those keyword searches, sometimes it takes us a little longer than usual because we do have to, some people they'll spell out the entire thing that they have, whether it's a certification or a software, whatever the case is, and other people will only put the acronym. So I would suggest doing both just because it makes it more accessible and easy to.
Definitely. Well, the other thing is some of the acronyms, you can have two different things that have the same acronym. So it's more clear to us too. And the other part of it is that I like the way the education is laid out so easily, but I also just from the first 10 seconds of looking at that resume, I can tell that they have a master's degree,
right?
Because it's up in the summary too.
Yep.
And some of our positions require that, so that would make it a lot easier for us to qualify them quickly.
Oh, and this is a good example of the LinkedIn URL that I was talking about. So it's in, and then you can customize this last part here.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, I think, like you said, this one is pretty good. I expect the next two that are from Resume Genius are also good, but I just wanted to pull them to see like what different aspects they had. So this is sample.
Yeah, Megan, why don't you start on that one?
Mechanical engineer. Pretty similar, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is literally pretty much the same thing. They laid it out really well.
There's the additional skills you were talking about, that making sure those were all on there.
GPA, does that matter to you guys?
Not really.
No, as long as you got that degree.
I mean, if I had a 3.6 in mechanical engineering, I would probably put it on there too.
Yeah, true.
I don't put my GPA on mine. I just leave it off. I guess I could, but I don't.
I guess the same thing up here. He puts in, I assume it's a he. Is there a name? Kiki.
No, there's no name. So it could be either. It could be anything.
Is the email address. So I assume that's her name. I don't think that's a he name. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
They put the years of experience right here. I guess that's the one thing that I would say is like there's no name on here, which is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would need to be changed.
Yeah. I'm wondering.
So now some places do require the GPA though. Going back to that, some places do require that, but they should be.
Right. Especially if it's an internship. If you're in college and you're applying for internships, some internships require
a 3.5 or above.
Yeah.
I think one of them I heard of was a 3.8 or above.
Right, or whatever it is. They require some indication of your GPA.
Yep.
And then the
go back really quick. I'm sorry, down to the education part. I would just say that that goes back to what you were asking about the bachelor's too, right there, Ian, because like some of our specific positions right now, I have one that literally says needs a Bachelor of Science in engineering, math, or like those are the only three. So I think really being specific, especially if you know what you're applying for,
right,
really laid out really well.
Yeah, so not just saying like not just taking this off and saying mechanical engineering.
Right. Yeah. So
or a BA.
Actually, to be honest with you, if I just saw mechanical engineering on there, I would be like, I wonder if what they have. Maybe they didn't graduate yet.
Right.
Or vice versa, if they just put a bachelor's, that's all they put.
Oh,
yeah. And if you don't have the degree, then it should say in progress or something like that. Or yes. Don't. Yeah. You should not put bachelor's of science if like that, unless you actually have the degree completed.
So that brings up another question. For college students, at what point during their college semester, year, lifetime, should they start applying for jobs for after college? Like what? Here's
the great thing is that most colleges have really good career, career centers and things like that. So really your freshman year, that should be one of the first things. You figure out where you live, you figure out where your classes are, and you go to the career center.
Yep.
So I think
there really fast. The career center will also, like you're saying, figure out your class, all that. If you know what you want to go, like there's a lot of people I didn't know when I was a freshman or even sophomore what I wanted to do in my life. But if you are like going to college, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a mechanical engineer, and you know that, the career center is going to help you make the connections that you need to make to be successful in that specific category. So definitely,
absolutely.
If your college has a career center, definitely take advantage of it early.
Yep. And you'll see that the other part of it is that career centers also have great resources. They have their own kind of job board that they can provide you with access to. You can go to career fairs, virtual right now probably, but there's also in person. Typically, I'm seeing people out of college getting degrees as early or getting positions sometimes right away after they've had their internship, maybe their junior or senior year.
Yeah.
So like maybe right after their junior year, that summer, a lot of times they're getting job offers right out of that. So there are several, that doesn't mean that if you don't have a job offer, you're not going to get one, but I would start early if I was a college kid. That's what I tell my kids. Yeah. Start early.
All right, let's jump to this last resume. So this one is an example of a military person transitioning to civilian. So that is actually pretty
common for us.
And common for, I couldn't think of the word. Common is for us. From what I've heard, usually these resumes are pretty long. I don't think there's actually that's like a instruction page for setting up the resume.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I would say that what we usually see with people who've had, like, if they're retiring from the military, they've been, in the military for a very long time. What I've seen is they have the master resume, and then they build all of their experience out, and then they're tailoring their resume for a specific job. Based, using that as essentially their resource. But one of the other things I'd like to mention is, we participate in the AVA, which really does a very good job of helping military members transition to the civilian world. And there are just so many resources out there for people who are transitioning from military to civilian. You've earned that help and that support. So please make sure that you reach out and use it. They're a great deal. The Fleet and Family Services on base. Many of the veterans organizations, career centers in your community are more than happy to help with the resume, as well as with, reaching out and helping you sort out what kind of positions you'd be a good fit for.
Yeah. So this one follows that same pattern pretty much. The only thing that it doesn't have is like an actual summary. It has summary of qualifications. Is that just as good as kind of that written paragraph?
What do you think, Meghan?
Yeah, I do. I think it's fine. The only thing that I would see that would just, he may want to add, or whoever this is may want to add in there, would just be, again, the years of experience, because I don't really see like a summary of time in there, but that's out fine too.
I completely agree, Megan. The years of experience is super helpful.
Yeah.
Sarah, what do you think about the social media?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I prefer not to have the social media. I mean, I don't look at.
I would also assume, and I'm wondering why they put this on a military.
Yeah, I would rather not see that.
Folks out of the military probably don't have social media, or probably aren't active. Maybe LinkedIn, but I don't.
LinkedIn, they should be. They should be building the career transitions would probably help them build their LinkedIn. But this is, I mean, when you're looking for a position, I think having that LinkedIn on there, if you would like to have that LinkedIn on there, should be enough.
Yeah.
Unless I would say though, Ian, for your position, like now you're not allowed to leave Avian, but if you were leaving Avian for some reason, and you wanted to have some of your social media on there because you've kind of built a brand for yourself, then that might be a different situation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
that's what I was
imagine if I not leaving Avian, if I were to, it would probably be something that's similar. So them being able to see that I have built, like you said, this online
brand,
would help my case. The other thing I want to point out, I exported these directly from Microsoft Word, and you can see this line didn't export correctly. Make sure if you're sending this to people that things happen the right way, because to me, I mean, if I were looking at a resume, and I'm not a hiring manager, but if I was, I assume it would be for some sort of role. I would want to see that they took the time to fix that error.
Well, the other thing is, I would say that sometimes simpler is better with formatting. So the more complicated you make it, the more likely there are to be issues when it's being uploaded or, transition from a Word document to a PDF.
Go ahead. Any other things about this resume?
No, I was going to say, I do agree with that, Sarah. Unless you're like an Ian, I wouldn't spend the time doing all those extra lines and stuff in there. Like for me, I would literally never do that, because it would be my luck that it would blow up and look like a mess when it came in. So I don't think that's another thing that's just not necessary. And sometimes it, again, I've seen it when it comes in and like the whole right side would be completely messed up just because the way it came in on the ATS. So I would just say maybe just simpler. All that isn't necessary. Again, unless you're like a professional, no, it's not going to cause any issues.
What about if somebody's sending you an electronic resume? Do you prefer like it to be exported in PDF? Does it matter if it's a Word document? What's a tip there for that?
It should be a PDF.
Yeah. I've also had
I think anytime you're sending a document that shouldn't be modified, it should be a PDF.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, do we use an automated system that like pulls people's keywords and stuff? I don't know if we do, but
we do.
Do we? I know there are much larger companies than us that use very sophisticated software that will like scan a resume.
So we use a very, very sophisticated, Megan and I do it. But we type the keyword, we put the keywords in, and then all the resumes that have that keyword in. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, yes, that's what I mean.
Okay, yes.
Thing that I've been, it's like kind of, I'm on TikTok, so I watch a lot of weird things on there. But the one thing that I've seen as like a hack for resumes is that you take the actual job description, make it a really, really small font, and then make it white so you can't actually see it.
That's not very fair, is it now, Ian?
That's my question. If you come across a resume that doesn't actually have the keyword that you're looking for, but somehow pops up with your keyword search, okay.
Yeah, we move on.
Well, I think also what happens, for example, I was actually just doing one this morning with one of the managers, was I looked up integrated systems, but because there was literally nobody with integrated systems that popped up, it just decided to pull everybody who had systems in it. So it just pulled up every freaking system somebody had on their resume. So that goes back to what I said about making sure that you're putting specific things that you've worked with, and then also putting those acronyms in there for them. Because like if I'm looking up, if I don't even know what to use, but if I'm looking up something, sometimes it's easier to just search the acronym, because most of the time when people have actually worked with that and they're not just like putting it on the resume, they're really familiar with the jargon of what it is. So that's also another comfort thing of like, you know that they've worked with it. And it also speaks to itself too, when we call you and we ask you to tell us about your experience with this thing and you don't have it. So I mean, just don't lie on your resume.
Yeah,
Hack
absolutely. Well, and really, if you're qualified for the position, then those words that were in the job description should be in your resume anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're saying when we say tailor your resume. Don't make things up, but tailor it.
Yeah. All right. So we've been going for a long time now.
Long time.
Wrap this one up. There's our names. There's our beautiful faces. Well, that's it. Episode 20 is done. We are done the first season of the Work Awesome podcast. New episodes will be coming out on March 1st. We have a lot of exciting things coming, so definitely keep an eye out on the social media pages to keep up to date in this lapse of time. Thank you both, Sarah and Megan, for joining me today, and I will see everybody in about a month.
Take care. Thank you, Ian.
The Work Awesome podcast is brought to you by Avian. Avian is a 49% employee-owned company founded by retired U.S. Navy test pilots who believe passion and talent are the right traits to get the job done. Avian operates in a culture that thrives on innovation, creativity, and the entrepreneurial spirit. Instead of offering services through mere business transactions, Avian is redefining the government services industry by creating meaningful experiences and connecting talented people with important work. The passion that Avian's employees have for its work builds better partnerships for the future, and Avian's unique talents create real solutions. At Avian, we move fast, take risks, and don't settle for the status quo. To learn more, visit Avian's website at avian.com. That's avian.com.